Miles. I just wrote the USMLE Step 1 and I scored 260. So I thought I would record this video to share some of my tips and tricks and how to go through resources effectively, make a detailed study plan, and use your time effectively so you can achieve the score you want. So if you're anything like me, you really pay attention to details, and a really detailed video is something that I would appreciate. So that's really what this video tries to attack. So without further ado, I made this little PowerPoint slides, 24 slides, and I kind of walked through my experience and my plan that I did for myself. And so just a little warning that this started about maybe 6 months out before the test. So if you're in that boat, then this video is definitely for you. And if you're not in that boat and you're maybe 3 or 4 months or less, then you can still watch the video and pull out little tiny tips and tricks and things that could still help you with your remaining time. So first and foremost, number one thing is you have to believe in yourself. I know it sounds corny, and I know it's like, why are we talking about that? But I believe in you. Everyone around you believes in you, hopefully. But you need to believe in yourself. That's the thing that matters the most. It's a grind. It's such a grind. And it is the hardest thing I've ever done. And self-motivation was definitely my most powerful weapon. So you have to believe in yourself. You have to plant yourself right there. If you're someone that has previously struggled to achieve the marks you wanted in class, you have to plant yourself down and say, you know what? I'm going to give this one my best shot. I'm going to try my best. I'm here and I can do this. So that's the first tip. So I kind of did my study plan in 4 parts or phases, whatever you want to call it. So this is part 1. It lasted about 3 months, and I started this when I was in my 5th semester. So I kind of had the luxury at my school. We only did ethics and behavior for our 5th semester, so we had a lot of free time. So I was able to use a lot of that time to start studying for STEP. I know a lot of people say, well, you should start studying for STEP day 1. And yeah, you should, obviously. And I think that going through class and getting really good understanding in class really helped me. But if I could have started this stuff earlier, I would have, honestly. But I started in 5th semester, really strapping down on my resources and stuff. So this is what I did. So this was about 3 months out. The first part consists of a very deep content dive. So you want to get as deep into the weeds as you possibly can, understand like every single mechanism, every single step of every single mechanism, because this is the part where you really have to build your foundation. And the foundation is super important moving forward, because once you start UWorld, if you have a really weak foundation, then it takes a lot longer, because then you're going to get the question wrong in UWorld. You're going to go and look at the explanation, read their mechanism, and their explanations, in a way, they assume that you know a bit. They assume that you have the foundation. So if you're reading it and you don't understand their explanation, it's probably because you don't have the foundation. And then you got to go back, look at all these resources, do all this stuff, and it's going to take you like an hour per question. So you don't want that. You don't want to spend like 5 months doing UWorld. So get the foundation in early so that you can have an easier time moving forward. My next thing that I did was each morning with a partner, I did 50 NBME questions. And the point of that is to expose yourself to something new. And that's something that I experienced on test day. There was questions where I was like, what is this? This wasn't in UWorld, this wasn't in Boards and Beyond, it wasn't Pathom, it wasn't First Aid, what is this? You know? And that feeling of, I just gotta gather all the things that I've ever known and try to apply it to this question. That's a skill in itself. And I think that's important to build up that skill in part 1. The next thing is to get into the habit of doing about 40 minutes to an hour of exercise. Exercise is really important, helps kind of keep you oriented, it helps, keep your energy up, and it's going to be important later on when we start talking about like podcasts and mnemonics and stuff like that, because it gives you a way to break up your day. You don't want to spend all day in the chair in front of the screen because you just get too swamped. So it's really nice to have that kind of midday break where you go do something else and you're kind of studying at the same time. And I'll I'll explain how that works. Okay, so like I said, start the day with 50 questions. I would sit down with a partner. We would both do the 50 questions. We would have it timed, obviously. And then after we were done the set, we would both kind of go through question by question and like kind of talk about them, talk about what we were thinking at the time, maybe go to first aid or something like that to try to find the answers. But like I said, the point of this, it will help you study and it will help you remember things. Obviously, doing questions is obviously the best. But the point of this particular exercise is to help build up the skill of being faced with something that you've never seen before, but using an educated guess anyways, because that's something that's going to happen on test day. So that's the main part of this. And it also helps you kind of maintain this thing I call the question mode. So that kind of mode of being able to scan through to like front to back or start to finish of a question, go through the answer choices, think about it, choose it. That's something that you need to upkeep, because if you haven't done questions in like 3 months, then you get back into UWorld or you go back into your questions and you're rusty, you're slow, you're not good at eliminating and stuff like that. So it helps to keep you in that mode. And like I said, it simulates the feeling of seeing new things on test day, and that's important. Okay, so now we get into the meat and taters of it. So the deep content dive, like I said, it's to gain a deep understanding of concepts and mechanisms. And this is really important. This is a time where you prepare what I call pass-through material. So right now you're going to like be doing like a really deep dive of like pathoma, let's say. You're going in, you're watching the videos, you're taking notes, you're cross-referencing it with first aid, and it takes you a long, long time. But if you prepare the book, I'll show you what I mean. Here's my book. If you prepare it with highlights and notes and stuff like that, then next time you go through it, it only takes you about a quarter of the time to go through it. So you can pass through the material even faster next time if you prepare it properly. And that's really important because you don't want to just do kind of like one pass of pathoma, because then you're just going to forget, right? So afterwards, you want to go through it again and get that second pass of it, kind of, get acquainted with it one more time just so that it sticks in your memory. So it's important to prepare your material for future passes. The next thing is that you're going to hunt for mnemonics, acronyms, and radiology pictures, and we'll talk about that. And so this is an important thing, is to find good resources that you can reference with first aid. So we'll be talking about that. The two big ones for me, it's like if you're going to do anything, if you're going to use any resource you've ever heard of, people are talking about this and that and sketchy picturize and, these flashcards and Anki and whatever. For me, Boards and Beyond and Pathoma, that will just get you like such a big chunk of the test. Like on test day, it was like almost every time I saw a question, you're thinking back to something. Where did I see this before? And almost every time it was Boards and Beyond and Pathoma. They just crush it, really. They just crush it. And so those are just the two that if you're going to do anything, at least do those. That's like the basics. Pathoma is the basics. Boards and Beyond is comprehensive. Okay, so this is kind of the order that I would go through in terms of passing through material. Okay, so let's say you get to a topic. So the first thing that you do is you come to the topic, you watch or you read the most informative resource you can. Usually it's Boards and Beyond. Okay, so basically we're talking about you just watched a Boards and Beyond video. Okay, now what do you do after you're done the video? Well, you can just go through 100 Boards and Beyond videos, but it's not as effective, in my opinion, as doing kind of this 3-tier system. So you watch the video in Pathoma or in Boards and Beyond, and then you go to first aid and see what they have to say about it. Because what first aid is they'll just give you a topic, and then they'll just give you a big list of everything they know about that topic in a big paragraph, all separated by commas. It's a hard read, and you don't want to read through first aid. It's too hard of a read. It's not meant for like human reading. They're just trying to put as much information as they possibly can as a reference. So, but Boards and Beyond, he's like well spoken, and he'll explain the topic, and it'll click, and it's like in pure, simple to understand English. So, you watch the video in Boards and Beyond. Then you go to first aid and go through their list. Okay, yeah, he touched on this, he touched on that. Oh yeah, I understand this, I understand that. And then there'll be like maybe one or two words that never popped up in the video, and you're just like, what are they talking about here? And then you might have to research those one or two words to see what they're talking about. Maybe it's important, maybe it's not. But basically, first aid is just like, they have everything and more. So you just go to first aid after you watch the video, make sure he touched on everything, and if there's one or two things that are kind of stragglers, you might want to hit that, just in case it pops up like in UWorld or something like that. So what I did, okay, this is a personal preference, okay, this is a very personal preference, is that, let's say, instead of Boards and Beyond, let's say Pathoma. Okay, so you watched a section in Pathoma, then you go to first aid, and first aid is going to have a whole lot more on that topic than Pathoma does. Okay, so what are you going to do? You could either take what Pathoma said that isn't in first aid and add that into the first aid book. Or you can kind of go through the first aid like section that Pathoma is talking about, and maybe there's like 5 or 6 things that they mentioned that Pathoma didn't. Well, you could add all 5 of those or 6 of those things into Pathoma, which I kind of did just because Pathoma itself is easier to read than first aid. Or you can this is what I did, is that I would, let's say of those 5 or 6 straggler things that weren't in Pathoma but it's in first aid, okay? Maybe only 2 or 3 of them I've actually heard about in class as well. And so I'm like, okay, I definitely know this is important. I'm not sure why Pathoma didn't mention this, but I should definitely add it into the Pathoma book. And then there's a couple more things where you don't know yet if those are important. So I just kind of let those be for now. Maybe they'll pop up later in UWorld. But right now I'm preparing my Pathoma book to be a very complete resource that has things I've heard about in class, things that they mention, and things that are in first aid. So that's what I did for Pathoma, and we'll get to an example of that in a bit, actually. The other thing is that I had the BRS Phys book, and so I would kind of do the same thing, is I would add like little notes and stuff like that into the BRS book that I saw maybe in first aid or in a Boards and Beyond video, and I'd add it into that book to do my Phys pass later on. And then I have these other things called micro flashcards, and I'll show you those in a bit, that I would do the same thing. And then, once I was done cross-referencing with first aid and adding some information to my pass-through material, then I would use an associated memory system. So, for example, micro, pharm, and biochem. Those are 3 kind of tough subjects. It's like, they don't really tell a story, right? Like physiology or something like that. They're just facts. Here's the bug, here's the auger, here's the virulence factor, or like here's the pathway in biochem. You need to know this enzyme, this enzyme, this enzyme. They're all rate limiting steps. This is what inhibits it. This is what activates it. It's like, it doesn't make sense. It's just hard to know facts. So for these hard to know kind of just factual topics or subjects, you kind of need a memory system or a way of remembering it. And so there's different memory systems. Some people use Anki. Some people use kind of like visual mnemonics, like Sketchy and Pixarize. That's what I liked. It's honestly personal preference. But I find that Anki was too overwhelming and it was just too many cards. But I know for a fact that people use Anki and they kill it. So I'm not hating on Anki in any way. I just didn't use it. Okay, so I threw this slide in just to kind of show you a little bit more about what I mean. So this is the table of contents of first aid. So the first half of the book, they talk about these like kind of, it's like subject based or it's not systems based. It's like principle based. So it's like biochem, micro, path, pharm. Whereas the second half of the book is systems based. So depending on what school you come from, you may be more familiar with one or the other. So in the stuff in red underline, this is the stuff that I would highly suggest watching in Boards and Beyond. And so you can see that pretty much most of it is in red. So Boards and Beyond it just crushes. And then the stuff in blue, so biochem, micro, and pharm, I would also use a memory system for those as well. And then this one's in yellow just because you can use Boards and Beyond or you can use Pathoma. They're kind of interchangeable. I think Pathoma is kind of better for general principles, but they're both good, and I watched them both. A lot of these in the systems based is covered in Pathoma as well, and in Boards and Beyond. So you kind of watch those, you watch both of those, and then as you're watching it, let's say you get to the GI part of Pathoma, then you also watch the whole GI part of Boards and Beyond. Then you go to First Aid, you go to GI 367, and you flip through the pages, and you pretty much will see that you just listen to all of that. If you go to First Aid first and you start here and you go through, it's going to be way too overwhelming. You're going to be like, I don't know what they're talking about. There's too many words. They're all just separated by little commas everywhere. But then once you watch the videos, Pathoma and Boards and Beyond, then you come back and you're like, oh, I totally understood this. I knew exactly what he was talking about. I got this. Then there might be like one thing in there that you're just like, oh, it wasn't mentioned in either of them. And then you'll have to research it a little bit and maybe add it into your Pathoma book. That's what I did. For physiology, like it's just sprinkled into Boards and Beyond. So if you watch all of Boards and Beyond, you're going to get a lot of physiology. But additionally, I used BRS Phys. Now, BRS Phys, it's a review series, right? So it's written by Costanzo, and she has like a bigger book that you can read. I think it's a little unnecessary. This is like the bare bones of what you need to know about physiology. This may not have everything, but you at least need to know everything in the book. So there's stuff beyond this book, but you definitely need to at least know the book. And then you could kind of add stuff into the book as you go through UWorld later on. Neuro. This one was just pure Boards and Beyond. It was so good. Okay, Psych. This one is the only kind of weird one that I thought it was good in Boards and Beyond. They definitely did a good job. But I thought that First Aid just by itself was sufficient, because it's just kind of like, factitious disorder or this disorder, and what is it? It's just like a list of all these disorders, and you just need to know the definition of the disorder basically in order to answer the question. So if you do that and you go through all of UWorld for Psych, like I pretty much never got a Psych question wrong after that. So that's just, that's my advice there. And then there's this thing at the end of the book called Rapid Review. A lot of people miss it. It's basically like 300 like quick questions. It's like, someone that has this, and this, and this. And then it's just like this disorder. And it's just like 300 of those pretty much. And I would kind of quiz myself with a friend. Like we would just do like kind of 50 at a time. And I'd just say one column and he would say what's on the other side of the column. And we would do that. Took us maybe like 2 or 3 weeks, and then we had the whole thing memorized. And it doesn't really like help you answer a lot of questions, but it really helps guide your studies. So like you'll see, let's say you're in like Gaucher's disease, or however you want to say it, Gaucher's disease, Gaucher's disease. And then you're going to go and you see like something about bone crisis, and you're like, what do you, like, I've never heard of that. What, like, all I heard was the tissue paper cells or whatever, right? But then you go and you start like watching Boards and Beyond or something like that, or you get to a UWorld question and you see that they do mention the bone. And you're like, yo, like, I saw that in First Aid, and it kind of helps you guide and orient yourself towards the high yield aspects of these disorders that you may not have considered to be high yield before. So Rapid Review is really, really good for that. Is it a must? No. Does it help? Yes. So that's all I have to say about that. And then I have this little blurb here on the side. Basically, anatomy and embryo, they're kind of tough. And so Boards and Beyond does a good job of covering the high yield anatomy, but he doesn't go through every nook and cranny. So you kind of have to decide what you're going to do with anatomy. Are you going to memorize every nook and cranny? Because honestly, there's only so much time in the year, in the day, right? And so you might want to just focus on the high yield, and that's kind of what I did. When I did anatomy, the course, I memorized every nook and cranny, but then afterwards it just leaves you, right? And so I just kind of stuck with UWorld and Boards and Beyond for anatomy and embryo. And the important thing is, though, radiology, and we'll talk about radiology in a bit. But I used high yield anatomy for radiology. It's a textbook, and they have a lot of good radiology pictures in there. And like I said, the memory systems I used for micro was this thing called Immunology and Microbiology Flashcards by Rosenthal and Sketchy. And for biochem, I used Pixorize. And then for Pharm, I also used Sketchy. So those are my memory systems. Okay. So I'm going to kind of walk through an example of what I'm talking about here. So for an example, let's just pull this up. Hopefully you can still see. So this is like the flashcard deck. I have an online version, and I kind of recommend the online version because you can add notes to it. So let's say you're going through the flashcards, you get to Rhizopus and Mucor. You're going through, and they give you a case study, patient with diabetic ketoacidosis, classic, thick black discharge from the nostril, and you're going down, and you see, where is it? Maybe it's in the lab ID. Okay, you see lab ID, it's diagnosed by distinct morphologies seen on biopsy. So this is just like an example of like one of the resources. This could have been in pathoma, this could have been in anything, but sometimes they'll say something that you need a little bit more on. Diagnosed by distinct morphology. What morphology? So then you go to your first aid, you search up Rhizopus, okay, and you see right here, you're reading the section in first aid, irregular, broad, non-septite hyphae branching at wide angles. And they love that, the wide angles, right? And they even give you a picture of it right here. So then you kind of take that, copy it, and put it in, and this kind of allows you to input information. So now I have irregular, broad, non-septite hyphae branching at wide angles. So next time when I'm doing a pass-through of this specific resource and I come here, I have a little bit added information from first aid to kind of fill in those gaps. Okay. So I just have that here. I come to this in the flash deck. I cross-reference with first aid. I add it into the flashcards. And then after that, then I watch the sketch on it in Sketchy. So a lot of you might be thinking, oh, that's like kind of overkill. But honestly, like if you just get into a rhythm of doing it, you can get through a lot of these at once in a day or maybe a week. And it's a really, really effective method of trying to memorize these bugs and stuff. I recommend just trying it once with just one bug. Go to the flash deck, read what they have to say, go to first aid, add the stuff in, and then watch the Sketchy on it, and you're just going to be the master of that bug. And then later on, when you come back and you look at the flash deck again, you're going to remember inputting that information. You're going to go back and you're going to look at the sketch again later, and you're going to be like, oh, I remember all of this. So it really, really sticks. So a second example here. So let's say you get to viral hepatitis in pathoma. So I have it somewhere. I won't bring it up just for the sake of time. But there's this little section that's called viral hepatitis, and they give you this nice chart, and then they talk to you about just in general viral hepatitis, and then you cross-reference it into first aid. So let's go into first aid here. Viral hepatitis. Okay. So I think it might have been here. So you're going through, this is the hepatitis viruses, and you're going through, and then all of a sudden you see this thing. Granular eosinophilic ground glass appearance due to the accumulation of surface antigen. So that's not in pathoma, okay, but it is in here. And you're going to read all of this whole section on first aid, and there's going to be a lot of things in here that aren't in pathoma, but you may or may not skip that. You may say, okay, this ground glass appearance, I've heard about that in class. Maybe I'll add that into my pathoma book, or maybe you'll skip it. But then you're going to get into UWorld, and you're going to see that you actually needed this piece of information here to answer a question. Then you're going to go back to first aid. You're going to see, damn it, first aid had it. Then you're going to add it into your pathoma book, such that when you're done UWorld, and then you're going to do a second pass of your content, you'll see it in your pathoma book, and then, you'll remember it. And then, like, a lot of you might be saying, like, well, why don't I just, add stuff from the pathoma book into the first aid? The first aid seems more complete. It is more complete. It's just a really hard resource to read, I find. It's just very dense, takes a long time. It's not written in a way that's, like, helpful to read. It's just all these things, this separated by commas. It's not like a storybook in a way. Pathoma is a little bit more of a storybook. It's easier and nicer to read. So that's why I did that. And there's also a lot of things in here that you'll never see again. They're just not high yield enough. Whereas in Pathoma, everything is high yield pretty much. So it's kind of, you want to pick and choose all the high yield stuff from first aid and put it into Pathoma was my way of going about it. Okay. So here is my third example. So this is a little bit different. It's like now you get to neuro, like I said, was really, really good in boards and beyond. There's just so much going on in boards and beyond, and then you go back to first aid, and it's kind of hard to input stuff into boards and beyond because they're mostly PDFs. I mean, you could download the PowerPoint version, I guess. But honestly, I would just watch it as intently as possible and just try to, you've already seen it all in class. You've already taken exams on it. So you already know a lot of what they're talking about. You could take notes if you really want to. For the sake of time, I just watched a lot of boards and beyond, just slow and, well, not slow, like 1.5 or 2 speed, you know what I'm saying? And then just try to listen to every word, understand. Don't go through the video and he just said something, you don't understand it, whatever, I'll get it later. No, just pause the video, go back and understand it. And then once you get to UWorld, that's when everything kind of comes together. So you'll see a neuro question, and you'll be like, oh, I remember the boards and beyond guy saying something, but I just can't remember it. And then you'll guess and get it wrong. And then you'll read their explanation. You'll go back to the boards and beyond video, get it again, and then you'll maybe make a flashcard, which we'll talk about later. And then you'll continue. And then after you're done your first pass of UWorld, you'll go back and watch this one again. So you get multiple exposures to it. Okay. So this is a tip. Don't add the entirety of first aid into your resources. So like I said, be the judge the first time around as to what you think is important or what you've learned in class. You'll have another chance once you get to UWorld. Maybe you skipped something in first aid and you thought, that's not important. But then you'll get a UWorld question on it and then you'll be like, it was important. So then you're going to have a second chance to add stuff in later. So your first time around, go through first aid. After going through your informative resource like Boards and Beyond and Pathoma, be the judge of what you think is important before you add it into your pass-through material. Okay, now you're done. You've gone through all the content. You've gone through Boards and Beyond. You've gone through Pathoma. You've gone through the flashcards. You've gone through all the sketchy Pixarize. You have all this knowledge just pouring out of your ears and you're forgetting stuff. And now it's time to jump into UWorld. Okay, so my first pass of UWorld, I don't know what it is now, like 3,500 questions or maybe 3,600 questions at this point. So I tried to do about 120 questions a day, and that took me about 1.5 months around. It may have took a little less because I feel like there were some days I tried to do like 160 or 200. But I think 120 questions that's a grind. That's a grind because if you're going to do them right, it's going to take all day from the crack of dawn all the way to nighttime. So if you're only doing 40 questions a day, it's just going to take you too long. If you're doing 200 questions a day, you're probably not going through it effectively. So I found for me, 120 questions a day was good. It may or may not be enough for you, or it may be too much for you. It's kind of personal preference, but for me, it was 120. So like I said, the goals of this part, you're going to go through UWorld, try to do 120 questions a day, and adjust your pass-through material. Like I said, you get something wrong, you go back to the Pathoma book. Where did I miss this information? Oh, it's not in here. So I'll add it in. And there's this new feature on UWorld, which I think is probably, in my opinion, one of the number one features of your quest for step 1 is these flashcards. Okay. I think it's superior to Anki just because A, you're making the flashcard, so you kind of remember it more. B, the flashcards are just based off your weaknesses. So like if you download the crazy Anki decks, they have like 30,000 flashcards. You might not need to go through all those flashcards. Maybe there was only 2,000 of them that you actually really needed. So this kind of helps narrow down that deck. And UWorld makes it pretty easy to make the flashcards. You just kind of highlight something. It gives you an option, make a flashcard, highlight the other part, put it into the other box. So We'll get into how to make the flashcards in a second, but the flashcards I think was really, really effective for me. The next thing that we're going to talk about is exercising with Golgi and Mnemonics. So we'll get into that. And this thing that I call end of the night upkeep. So this was a typical day for me in phase 2 or part 2. So I'd get up, start my day at 7. So first question in the ground at 7 o'clock. And I would do 40 questions with the review. So you do 40 questions timed, and then you go through it. You try to do a deep review, right? You're trying to, like, if you get something right and you obviously know it, you're just going to kind of go through it quickly and move on. But if there's something that you don't know or you got it wrong, you got to stop and you got to make it right. So for me, 40 questions takes about 4 hours. So it may take less time for you, it may take more time for you. For me, it was about 4 hours. So I'd go from about 7 to 11, doing the first 40, take about a 30-minute lunch break, do the next 40, brings me to about 3:30 or so. Then I'd start doing my exercise with Golgi. So Golgi is this pathology professor, and someone basically recorded his 30 or so lectures and made them into kind of podcasts, so you can download them. They're really good. So, and I'll talk about that a bit more in a sec. And so I do an hour of exercise while listening to him, or listening to these things that I call self-recorded mnemonics. We'll get into that too. So that kind of helps break up your day, because you just spent, from 7 to 3, almost 8.5 hours there, just doing questions and reviewing. So your brain's going to be, so you're going to want to do some exercise, get outside, but you're still studying at the same time. So it may sound like, oh, you're never giving yourself a break, but honestly, it does feel like a break. So it's good. Have some food. Then you want to kind of just grind out those last 40. So that'd be about from 5 to 9. And these are rough. If you have like a good day, you might end early. You might end at like 7 o'clock. If you have like a bad day, it might drag out till 10. So these are just kind of rough estimates. Sometimes it didn't take me 4 hours to do 40 questions, but sometimes it did. So kind of allow yourself that time to know what your time frame is. Then at the end of the day at 9 o'clock, I'd finish strong with about 30 to 40 minutes of what I call upkeep, which we'll talk about in a sec. Try to end the day before 10. That way you can kind of wind down for an hour at the end of the night. We all need that wind down time. You can't just, at the very end, close UWorld, shut your eyes and start sleeping. It just doesn't work like that. So you need about an hour, hour and a half, watch a couple TV shows, do what you have to do, call your girlfriend, boyfriend, or whoever, and then you can wake up at 6:30 and have a half hour before the next day starts. That gives you about a 7.5-ish to 7 hour sleep, which is kind of typical for a lot of us. Okay, so some tips about UWorld. When you get something right, let's say you're the master of something, you get it right, okay? Don't spend like 20 minutes going through the whole explanation, being like, oh yeah, I knew this. Oh yeah, definitely. You know what I'm saying? Like, go through it kind of quickly. I already know this. You need to spend time on your weaknesses, not your strengths. So you already know it. Just maybe read the learning objective. Or maybe there was one answer choice you weren't so sure of. Maybe read that answer choice just to make sure, okay, what is this? But don't spend a lot of time on the questions that you definitely already know. You want to spend, because it's going to take you a long time to get through UWorld. So you want to divert your time to the weaknesses. So you get something wrong or you're unsure about it, you got to do a deep dive. You got to go back to the books. You got to go to first aid. You got to maybe even watch the Boards and Beyond video again. You got to go back, fix your pass-through material. This is the time to add stuff in for your future passes. So you really this is the time right now. You get something wrong in UWorld and you have to make a big deal about it. Okay, you got to become the master of that. Make your weaknesses into your strengths right there. And then the next part is make a flashcard about your weakness. Now, this is something that's kind of tricky for some people. Don't just, let's say, for example, you get a question on cardiac myxoma and you get it wrong. Okay. Don't make the flashcard just say cardiac myxoma and then the back of the flashcard, just the whole explanation of cardiac myxoma, because that's not going to help you. You have to think back. Why did I get this question wrong? What about it did I not know? Then you're going to go through it and you're going to say, okay, it was the description. I didn't know that a mucopolysaccharides matrix corresponded to a cardiac myxoma. So go into the flashcard and make it specific as to what the exact weakness was. Put histological description of cardiac myxoma, question mark, or put, tumor in the heart that has a mucopolysaccharide matrix, and then put the answer, cardiac myxoma. Or maybe the problem wasn't the description. You knew the description. You knew it was gelatinous. You knew it was mucopolysaccharide matrix, but you didn't know how to identify the actual picture. So you saw the picture and you're like, I didn't know that's what a mucopolysaccharide matrix looked like. So you're going to take that picture now, put it at the front of the flashcard, and then underneath put tumor in the heart, question mark, and then, put the answer as cardiac myxoma. So you really have to kind of meditate on the topic and say, what was the exact weakness? What was my exact problem? Pinpoint that problem and make it into a flashcard. Another kind of interesting example is my friend, she always got SGLT2 and PCSK9 confused. And if you know what those are, you might be thinking, how can you get that confused? SGLT2 is in the kidney, PCSK9 is, about the LDL receptor. Those are totally different things. You know what? Maybe to a lot of us, they are totally different things, and how could you ever get that confused? But it was her personal weakness. She had them jumbled up in her head. They're just a bunch of letters and numbers to her, so she always kind of got them confused. So I told her to make a flashcard, SGLT2 versus PCSK9. And so now she has to rep that out every day. Okay, SGLT2 is this, PCSK9 is this. It's the flashcards, in my opinion, are very personal. Make them very personal as to what your specific weakness is. So maybe you need to, take two topics that are totally unrelated, but you get them mixed up, put them into a flashcard. It really helps. So just a little FYI, my total flashcard count at the end was 1,500. So that might sound a lot, might sound like a little, I don't know, depending on who you are. But, it's about half of UWorld. So I kind of had a problem with about almost half of UWorld. So you got to, or you find them in other places, after you're done UWorld, you go back, you read Pathoma again, you're like, oh, I totally forgot about this fact. How am I going to remember this? Maybe I'll just make a flashcard about it. So in the end, my flashcard count was about 1,500. I think that if, you have like 4,000 flashcards in the end, maybe it's too much. I don't know. If you only have about 400 or 500, maybe it's too little. Who knows? But for me, it was 1,500. Okay. So take a little bit of time to talk about radiology. So radiology, for a lot of us, is tough. It's just a screen of just black and white blurbs, and if you don't know where you are, it's over, because sometimes it completely relies on the radiology. And radiology, I find you just got to grab it wherever you can. So in Boards and Beyond, sometimes he'll show you a radiology picture and he'll walk you through it. Take a screenshot of that and put it into a PowerPoint document. In High Yield Anatomy, I went through the whole book and I just took almost every radiology picture that I thought was important, and I put it into that PowerPoint document. UWorld, they'll have radiology and the explanations, screenshot, put it into the document. And some first aid, I didn't take much from first aid, but I definitely took some from first aid. Then what you should do is kind of label underneath the slide what they're talking about in the radiology picture, so that in your PowerPoint you can kind of search all these radiology pictures. Do I have it up? I do. So this was kind of my radiology document. Miles' super awesome radiology collection. And it just has all of these radiology pictures, and I have all of it labeled underneath. So I have about 266 pictures here, and they're from all over the place. They're from Boards and Beyond, they're from UWorld, and they're all searchable. And I find that doing a pass of this document, I did about 2 passes of this document, it really helped. I didn't get a radiology question wrong on the step. So this is just kind of what I'm talking about here. So grab the same picture from multiple sources, because you just see one picture, but then you see it somewhere else and it looks totally different, or something like that. So I find that, you see pulmonary edema, he's talking about it in Boards and Beyond, grab that picture. But then you see it also in UWorld, grab that picture. And then I'm not sure where this third picture is from. Maybe it was from High Yield Anatomy, but I grabbed that. And then you have a slide of all these pictures of pulmonary edema and what it looks like. And it really helps to solidify, the overall picture of what pulmonary edema looks like. And then, like I said, in the notes section underneath, put pulmonary edema, such that later on you can just go into the document and search up pulmonary edema, and boom, there's 5 radiology pictures right there on pulmonary edema. Okay. So this is what I was talking about with the exercise. So like I said, Goljan has these excellent podcasts or lecture recordings. They are slightly outdated, so sometimes I would like hear him say something. And I'll be honest, it's rare. It was rare. It's there, but it's rare. And he'll say something, and I'll be like, I think now actually it's taught that it's this. But honestly, most of it is legit, and I think it's still worth listening to. He's really entertaining. He's just, he's funny. He's like a little out there, and he's got like an easy to listen to voice. And his style of lecturing I find is good. It's questions. So he'll be like, so someone comes in and they have this, this, and this. What do they have? And you're just on your bike or you're walking and you're just like, is it vaginal adenosis? And then he's just like, no, pretty much, or says something, and then you're just like, oh, it just like makes you think. And like the way that he's like talking about it, it really sticks. It stuck with me. He'll just like say a funny story about it, or he'll say something that's like kind of, a little inappropriate or something like that, and you'll just be like, oh, and it really sticks with you. So I thought that was a really good use of my time. It's about 30 hours, so if you're doing an hour of exercise a day, it takes about a month to get through the whole thing. And I really liked it. The next thing, so this is what I did. Some people call me crazy about it, but I thought it was really effective. So I went through first aid, and they have these mnemonics and acronyms and stuff like that, right? And so I'd go through and I'd find my favorite ones, or like ones that I'm like, okay, this is a lot of information in one acronym. This is useful. Or this one I'm just like, it's kind of stupid. I don't want this one. And I'd take them all and I put them all in a document, just like my radiology document. It's about 60 slides or so. And then I went through on my phone and I recorded myself saying all the mnemonics. So like, here's an example. This is pulled off a few pages from first aid here. It's a lot of the viruses. So I would go and I would have myself record and I'd say, this is the mnemonic to remember the positive stranded RNA viruses. I went to a retro toga party where I drank flavored Corona and ate hippie California pickles. Retro for retrovirus. Toga for toga virus. And I would just, go down like that, and I'd say all these mnemonics like that. And it took about maybe 2 hours or 3 hours or so, maybe 2.5 hours to record the whole thing. And then every day when I did my hour of exercise, I would just listen to an hour of it. And then, the next day I'd listen to the second hour. And so I just keep listening to it over and over and over again. And so like I did maybe 30 days of that before the exam. And I just had like all these mnemonics from first aid just memorized. Just because at the very, like when you start the mnemonic, you'd be like, okay, here's the mnemonic to remember coronavirus. In my head while I'm biking, I'm already like, it's perch. It's P for this, blah, blah, blah. And then you kind of say it slowly, like perch, P for poliovirus, E, echovirus. Give yourself like a little bit of time to think while you're on the bike or walking to answer it yourself. And I thought that was really helpful to remember, 100, 200 mnemonics. It's a lot of information at your disposal really quickly, right? Okay. So this is what I keep talking about, the end of the night upkeep. This was one of the most important things as well. So I know it's like the end of the day, you've just done so much UWorld, you've exercised, you're totally exhausted, and you just have to strain yourself just a bit more because this is super effective. It's like one of the most effective 40 minutes of the day. Do 10 to 15 minutes of flashcards, try to go fast, and do 20 minutes of sketches through Sketchy and Picturize. And again, try to go fast. Not watching the videos, just looking at the image, going over each element, seeing what they're talking about. In 20 minutes, you can maybe watch like 1 or 2 of these videos, but in 20 minutes of just going through, when you've already seen the video, you can get through maybe like 5 or 6 sketches. So I did a full second pass of both Sketchy and Picturize just by doing these end of the night upkeeps. And then you'll get through a lot of the flashcards in 10 to 15 minutes as well. You can get, if you're doing like 6-7 seconds a card, over 15 minutes, you can get through a decent amount of cards. And it adds up if you're doing it every single night, right? So I thought that this was really important. And definitely when I was on test day, like I said, you're answering the question, where are you pulling the information from? for me, a lot of it was the flashcards, and a lot of it was sketchy, especially Picturize. Picturize kills it for biochem. If you have a problem with biochem, Picturize is really good for it. Okay. So, UWorld incorrects. So, if you're doing, I did a second pass of UWorld, which I'll talk about in a sec. But if you're only planning on doing one pass, then after you're done your first pass, start the incorrects. For me, I got a lot of incorrects on my first pass. So instead of doing all of that and hammering out those incorrects and then resetting UWorld and doing my second pass, I just reset. I didn't do the incorrects. I just reset, did my second pass, and then hammered out my incorrects from my second pass, which there wasn't many, honestly, because I've hammered them out already. Whenever you get one wrong, I did such a deep dive into it. So I did not do UWorld incorrects on my first pass. I did it on my second pass. Just how I did it. Okay, so now we are in part 3. So you've done your first deep dive of content. You just finished a pass of UWorld. Now you're about, maybe a month and a half out from the test. So what I did is I went back to the books. I did another pass through my pass-through material, and it went way faster this time because I've had it all prepped. It's all, highlighted, and I have all my notes next to it, and I've already read it. So, and that's the big thing, is that you've already read it. So you already know what they're talking about. If you already know it really well, your eyes just kind of dart past it. But if you're like, oh, can't really remember this, then you kind of take a second and go through it slowly. So I did my pathoma again. I did the immuno and micro flashcard deck again. I did another read of BRS Phys. I went and did Boards and Beyond. I didn't do the whole thing again, but I definitely did the ones that I thought were really good, like neuro, and I think I did like renal and GI and like all the major systems again. Stuff like public health science, like the ethics and stuff like that. I did that again. And you can go through it a bit faster this time. Like for me, I know some people can't, but I did do like 3 times speed, sometimes 4 times speed, because you're not learning it again. You're just reminding yourself, right? So you're just letting your eyes kind of pass over the screen, listening to the words again. Oh yeah, oh yeah, remember that? Oh yeah, damn it, I kind of forgot about that. Pause the video, make a flashcard on it. If it's like that one straggler thing that you forgot about, wasn't in UWorld, and you feel it's important. Okay, so kind of has to meet those 3 criteria. A, you forgot about it. B, it wasn't in UWorld. And C, you feel it's important. If it's something that's just like, hey, this is just stupid and I'm never going to see this, then maybe it's not worth your time to make a flashcard about it. But if the Boards and Beyond guy made a big deal about it, wasn't in UWorld, and you forgot about it, probably want to make a flashcard about it. Okay. And then stick with that 1 hour-ish at the end of the night of doing the end of the night upkeep, because I thought that was super important. Just at the end of the night, going through, drilling the flashcards, drilling the sketches, just to help you remember that stuff again. So this is important too. Once you've finished your second pass of your pass-through material, restart your flashcard deck and do a full round of flashcards. Because really, if you did the flashcards right, the flashcards are just your weaknesses, right? It's just the stuff that you had a hard time remembering. It was just stuff you got wrong. It was just stuff you forgot about. It's your weaknesses, right? So the flashcards at this point is the most important source for you now. It's the flashcards. That's where you need to touch up the most. So do a full round, sit down, take like maybe 3-4 days and just hammer flashcards all day long. And then until it just ingrained into your skull. Okay. So part 4, this is where I did UWorld again. So this time I did about 160 to 200 questions a day, and a few days of doing the full 280, sorry. So this took about 20 days, just because I was doing more questions, and honestly, I actually had more free time. So I started maybe about 8 o'clock or so, and by the time I was done the questions with UWorld, done the end of the night upkeep, it was only like 7 or 8 o'clock. So I had a lot more sleep. And the reason why is because you don't need to do such a big review this time. If you did the first pass properly, then when you're doing the second pass, it's like you've already done it. You're just reminding yourself of the questions, reminding yourself of the stems and the answer choices and really you're just reading the learning objectives. And there's going to be a few questions here and there that you forgot about. But mostly you've already seen it all before, and you've already done a deep dive of the stuff you got wrong or were unsure about. So this should go fast. You should be doing, maybe 120 questions all in a row, and then go and do the exercise, maybe an hour, listen to the mnemonics, come back, crush the last 80, have dinner, do some end of the night upkeep, maybe up your flashcard count, maybe to 30, 40 minutes, and do another 30, 40 minutes of sketchy and picturize, and then end the night. So you're just kind of easy breezy going through a bunch of UWorld questions, do a big second pass. And I truly believe that UWorld was this very similar to step one. I know at the beginning we talked about doing the NBME questions. And by the way, I forgot to say this, but I would recommend doing the newer NBME questions. But yeah, I definitely thought that UWorld was more indicative of STEP than the NBME. The NBME were just one-liners, or sometimes there were a few liners, and they were just kind of weird sometimes. And I don't know. I mean, they were good, and there were questions on the STEP that were like the NBME, but as I was going through the STEP, I remember thinking to myself, wow, UWorld killed it. UWorld was I did it. This is exactly what I should have done, was UWorld. So I really suggest doing UWorld twice. It was really good. So that's what I did there. And then I did this thing too, is that there's an option on UWorld while you're doing the flashcards to label the flashcards in a different color. So as you're doing the flashcards, you'll be like, okay, I know this. And then you get to a flashcard and you're like, this one always gets me. Damn it. What was this again? And then on those cards, they give you an option to label it in a color, like blue, green, red, whatever, right? So I would label them red. And then once I was gone through my whole flash deck again of the 1500, I only had about 200 that were labeled red. Then they give you an option to isolate all of those 200 reds and put them into a new flash deck. So now you have a flash deck of just the reds. Then you rep out the reds. And then I did a second coloring kind of scheme where it's now I know all of these, which ones are giving me trouble still. And then I labeled those in purple. And then I only had about, I think, maybe 70 purples. And so then I made a new flash deck of the 70 purples. And then I repped those out until it was done. And keep looking at the sketches if you're a sketchy or picturized person, because that was really, really helpful. All right. Last week before the exam, get lots of sleep. You don't want to go to the test and blame it on lack of sleep. Get a lot of sleep. There's not much, you've already done so much. You've done UWorld twice. You've done 2 passes of all of the resources. There's not much within this last week that can help you, really, in my opinion. But you want to still keep the things that are in your short-term memory. Maybe you have a flashcard that has 10 antibody drugs on it, and you're just you only know it because it's in your short-term memory. You still want to rep those out. So go through the hard labeled flashcards. Go through your favorite resource just to build your confidence. If you for instance, I just watched the Boards and Beyond videos maybe 4 or 5 times speed. It was I'm not even really learning it. I'm just kind of because you already know it. So you're just kind of looking, letting your eyes pass over the screen. You're just I know this. You're just kind of building confidence, going through your flashcards, going through the sketches, just all of the upkeep. There's no more drilling questions and drilling content. You're just kind of going through the flashcards, going through the sketches, going through just some tough videos, and it's just pretty much pure upkeep for the last week. And then test day. So we all take tests differently. So a lot of the test is going to be personal preference. For me, for example, I drove myself in the car. My mom was like, do you want me to drive you to the test? I just wanted to drive myself because I just wanted to be alone. I was hyping myself up in the car. Put yourself in a good mood. Don't go to the test like this and you're driving and oh my god, today's judgment day. I was there. I'm gonna be all right, let's get it. Let's do this. I gave a couple woo and just open the window, let the wind hit your face with your tongue out you're the Joker, and just put yourself in a good mood and hype yourself up. So during the test, some people will do 3 blocks at a time, take a break, do the whole test without a break. For me, I liked taking a break after every block, just to let your mind reset. Just like instead of doing like a really long, slow jog through the whole thing, I just do them kind of like in sprints. So I just like, go there, do all the questions, take a second, take a breather, go back, look over the questions again, make sure you made the right answer or like click the box that you wanted to click, you didn't misclick. And also, if there's a couple that you flagged, maybe look over them again. Just because sometimes when I'm on a flagged question, I don't want to like spend too much time on it just because in case I run out of time. So I'm just like, hey, I've already given it my minute and a half, and if I had to say, I'd go with this, but we'll come back maybe. Then at the very end, maybe you have 10 minutes left because you were faster on other questions. Then go back to the flagged one and be like, okay, now I have a bit more time, have a bit more of a clear head. Now I can actually look at this with a bit more intent. And then you could spend, that 5 minutes on one question at the end once you've already filled out all the questions. And then maybe, oh, I forgot, wasn't this and this and this? And then you were like, oh, wait, and then you get the right answer. So, some people say don't change your answer. It all depends. It's all personal preference. It depends. For me, sometimes I just put an answer in just because it's my educated guess and I've been taking too long on the question. But then when I come back, then I remember it. So then obviously I'm going to change the question there. But, sometimes I change the answer because I'm unsure of myself and you're jumping around and then you end up getting it wrong when you had it right originally. But for me, that's what I do. That's the way that I take the test. I go back, I go over, make sure I didn't misclick, go over my flags, and then I'll take my break. I'll go outside, close my eyes, and just like let your brain reset. Give your brain some more energy. Take a bite of sugar, cookie, maybe have a sandwich, take a couple sips of coffee. That was me. Maybe you're not a caffeine drinker. I am. Go to the bathroom because everyone hates when you have to pee and you're taking a test. And there was a couple times where I had a lot of time and I had to go to the bathroom, so I just, went to the bathroom and kept the timer running and then just came back. And there's no point of sitting there and you really have to pee. If you're quick about it, then, it only takes about 2-3 minutes and just don't freak out. And like I said, the exam was most similar to UWorld, in my opinion. At the end of the day, I think UWorld is just the best one. I know there's going to be a lot of people that have done it differently than me and have gotten a higher score than me or whatever, right? This is just my personal experience on how I did it. I hope that, out of all the tips and tricks that I gave, maybe 1 or 2 of them will apply to you. Maybe you'll take them all. Maybe you'll take none of them. But this was just, I wanted to share my experience with it and how I went about it. And if this can help anyone at all, then I think that I've achieved what I was trying to do. So with that, I wish you the best of luck in your studies. I will be all over the comments. If anyone has comments, maybe I forgot to say something, I will try to monitor them, and you can make your question as specific as possible, and I'll try to give you the most specific answer that I possibly can. All right. Well, like I said, take care and good luck.